This week we're going to be exploring the evolution of the Manic Street Preachers in the 90s. So recently you obviously had the big news of Oasis reuniting, and the Manic Street Preachers actually supported Oasis at Nebworth. Now I wanted to shine a light on some of those other bands in that time period. So for the Manic Street Preachers, they released quite a few albums in the 90s and their sound changed dramatically. So we're going to be looking at how this sound changed, what they were playing on the guitar, and also linking it to how the music landscape changed through the 90s. Motorcycle Emptiness was released in 1992 off their album Generation Terrorist. So this riff is very metal based. It almost sounds like something you would hear on a Guns N' Roses album. And at the start of their careers, the Manic Street Preachers were actually quite influenced by the likes of Axl Rose and also Slash 2. And this is found in this interview here.
But the Manics are not the glam punk pretenders some people think they are. They spent their childhoods trying to escape from the South Wales mining town where they lived, reading the music press and situationist text, watching Marilyn Monroe films, listening to Public Enemy, Queen...
Mick Jagger doing Jumper Jack Flash, Pete Townsend smashing his guitar, Sex Pistols, not the Clash anymore, Axl, Slash...
So I think the Manic Street Preachers is thought about as somewhat of a Britpop band, and they did release albums in that time period. But in 1992, that was actually pre-Britpop. And I think that's quite reflected in the sound, in that it's more towards the kind of grunge and metal sound rather than the Britpop sound that was going to come in a couple of years' time. So the part I love about this riff is the little climb up. I think that's great, and it's used in quite a lot of metal songs as well, where you're just climbing up the fretboard. So we're then going to actually skip an album and we're going to go to the Holy Bible. Now I think this is generally believed to be one of the fans' favourite or their most critically acclaimed album. So the Holy Bible was released in 1994. Around about 70 to 75% of this album was written by Richey Edwards. So I think this album has a little bit more of a punkier sound, and this is shown quite well on the song Revol. So let's pick this apart a little bit. We have got that introduction, and it has a really nice tritone on it. So it revolves around this first fret A note. And we kind of play a power chord. And then the tritone's here. Okay, it gives it such a great moody and dark sound. Then it comes in with those power chords. So again, really, really punky, just fast power chords being strummed. Then there's a little variation afterwards where we've got some unmuted power chords mixed in with the muted power chord. As you can see, this is already a little bit of departure from that type of riff that they were playing in the couple of albums before. Unfortunately, in 1995, disaster struck and Richey Edwards disappeared.
In January, that the disappearance of Richie James grabbed the headlines. Richie was the guitarist with the rock band the Manic Street Preachers. The night before the band were due to fly to America for a tour, Richie disappeared. 11 months on, he's still missing.
In 2008, he was legally declared presumed dead. So following this, the Manic Street Preachers were now a three-piece band, and they set about writing their next album, Everything Must Go, in 1996. This album was a much more melodic sound, and that's quite understandable considering everything that had happened. Richey Edwards was one of the primary songwriters in the band, and with him gone, the other band members started to contribute more to the sound of the Manic Street Preachers. And I think it's worth noting that we're now in 1996, so Oasis had come in 1994. Around that time period, the Manic Street Preachers were still quite, I guess, a heavy band. But with what happened to Richey Edwards, and I think the general music landscape was changing in 1996 or around that time period. I think generally in this time period, and certainly in this album, there was a lot more use of synths and also string section too. And it was quite a reflective album, and again I think that matches up with the time period when you had bands such as the Verve and also Radiohead starting to come through too. So one of their hit singles off this album was A Design for Life, which I think has possibly one of the best chord progressions of the 90s. If you wanted to learn this chord progression, then I actually did a video lesson on this, which you can find up there. I'm just going to play you the riff now, just because it's a really nice riff. So this was quite a contrast to the other songs that we've looked at, which was Motorcycle Emptiness and also Revol. They were very heavy, punky, very distorted sound, whereas this one kicks in with a really, really clean riff. Now I know in the choruses of the song it does get a little bit heavier, but the bulk of the song is this very clean chord progression, which it's a lovely chord progression. I think it is one of the best of the 90s. And I think this chord progression is really unique. It's not just your standard maybe G and D. There's actually some interesting choices and also the use of the open strings. They then released the album This Is My Truth, Tell Me Yours in 1998. The Manic Street Preachers were certainly a busy band in the 90s. They were averaging an album nearly every 2 years. On this album they released the hit song If You Tolerate This, Your Children Will Be Next, which actually reached #1 in the singles chart. And again, this is quite a melodic anthemic song, and you can kind of see how their sound had changed, certainly on this album and also the album before. You could almost lay a marker of when Richey Edwards was in the band and when he wasn't in the band, how much he contributed to their sound in those earlier albums, and then how much that sound changed when he disappeared. And again in 1998, I think it's just continued this more reflective period of that Britpop era. The year before, the Verve had released Urban Hymns. Again, that's quite heavy on the synths and also string sections with the chord progressions too. And you kind of felt with the Verve and also the Manic Street Preachers and somewhat Radiohead too, that the Britpop era was going into a little bit of a softer sound, and really it was even coming to an end. So the Manic Street Preachers evolved their sound quite a lot in the 90s. The earlier albums were quite riff based, very influenced by the hard rock and even metal genres. But as the years progressed and Britpop came in, the sound that they have changed to fit really, really well in that time period. The Manic Street Preachers are still touring to this day as a three-piece. They've released quite a few albums from that 90s time period. They've kept it really, really consistent and kept the quality high too.